for Equestria, Mission 3. Polly stepped out of the steel door as soon as the elevator reached the lowest floor. She and her partner were tasked with scouting the facility to see if there were any potential threats. The Griffin had tried to reach her commander on the radio, but all that answered her was static. This was nothing unexpected, however, since they had anticipated the facility to be shielded. Polly looked back to address her strangely quiet partner, her words dying on her lips. Directly behind her stood her partner, his eyes wide in surprise, an expression that was frozen onto his features, for his whole body was one solid block of ice. She backed away, not understanding what had happened, as her rear end collided with thin air. The last thing she saw as her head snapped around to look for whatever she had collided with was a slight ripple in the air that looked as if she had thrown a stone into a pond. Then everything went cold as she shared her partner's fate. Mystique wanted to struggle against her bonds, but the ropes that bound her were too tight. Those overgrown chickens had overwhelmed her in a matter of seconds after the elevator had emerged from the ground. She didn't even get to put up much of a fight before she had already lain on the ground. The emergency elevators could not be called from the outside, so these feather dusters had watched each and every one of them. That much at least she had been able to hear from their conversations. Had Frostmane known about this? Had she sent them out here to die? The Pegasus mare could not believe it. Their captain may have refused to help them, but in turn she refused to think this way of the pale blue mare. Frostmane had not only been her captain, but her friend as well. The whirring sound of the elevator coming back up filled the silent night. A few of her captors looked over to the circular opening in the ground. "So soon? Has something happened down there?" One of them wondered in a gruffy tone. That featherbrain Polly probably forgot her utility belt again," another one said with a dismissive wave of a claw. As the doors to the newly emerged elevator opened, several seconds passed without anyone stepping out. Instead, an assault rifle that had been pointed at her head only seconds ago clattered to the floor in front of Mystique. Its former owner fell on his side, his head facing backwards. The other four raised their weapons, looking around frantically for their attackers, when the head of a second griffin exploded. It had been crushed with enough force to make the splinters disappear in its neck. Out of the corner of her eyes, Mystique saw bloody hoofprints on the leaves around the newly slain griffin soldier. She didn't know if her captors didn't see them due to their panic, or just because she was simply closer to the ground. The three remaining guards stood back to back, scanning their surroundings. Something flashed briefly in the moonlight as Mystique felt herself being showered in two new fountains of blood. Two more had been decapitated cleanly. The last one turned his weapon towards Mystique's head, intending to use her as a hostage, but the talons holding the weapon were severed from their host. Finally, a spray of blood hit something. The outline of a mare, soaked in blood, appeared in the moonlight. Her cold blue eyes looked down at the thrashing griffin as she extended a blade from her left foreleg. The silent rage Mystique saw in those eyes made her shudder in fear for her own life. Without a word, her friend put a hoof on the chest of their last opponent to keep him still. The griffin locked eyes with her as Frostmane began to slide her blade into his chest. She did so slowly, not pulling the blade back out until he had stopped moving. Mystique, current leader of the resistance and a seasoned soldier, actually wet herself when those cold blue eyes turned on her. "Okay, every pony, what do you think about, Frostmane's augmentations, her implants? What do you think has the facility put into her? I mean, she can obviously become invisible. And, has a blade in her left foreleg, which is a cybernetic prosthetic because, she lost that one 15 years ago. But all of her augmentations are clearly combat models. So what else do you think she's able to do? Has Mystique anything to fear from her former captain? Sincerely yours, Visual Pony.